Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine18 Tarot and Books. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome. I am here with a VR to a really fun tag called Tarot Bartender, created by Imogen over at Sapling Tarot. They were kind enough to tag me, and I am very happy to make a VR. The premise of Tarot Bartender, of course, is to pair tarot decks with classic cocktails, and Imogen has provided a list of cocktails with a kind of prompt to inspire choosing a deck. I will timestamp those below. I'm also going to include a prompt of my own and some of the prompts that other folks doing VRs have added in their videos. Now I know that this lighting is a bit odd and the setting is a bit different than usual, but part of coming over for drinks at my house is sitting on my usually cat fur covered sofa. So here we are. I have not made myself a cocktail for this afternoon because it is rather early afternoon when I'm filming right now on a Saturday. So I have instead a hibiscus sour by Side Launch Brewery. This is a hibiscus rose hip and citrusy sour, like light beer with sour. So that is what I will be enjoying if I don't get sidetracked by the prompts and forget that it's there. So without further ado, the first prompt is the old-fashioned, your favorite classic tarot deck or a riff on a classic. An old-fashioned is a cocktail that I would order. I'm actually, you would not know because of my enthusiasm for this tag, I'm actually not a huge cocktail person. I am much more likely to order beer or wine if I'm ordering anything, but you know, I appreciate a cocktail, so I'm excited. An old-fashioned is one that I would order. And my favorite riff on a classic tarot deck is the Marseille Prendre Vie by Antiques Tarot. This is a deck that is definitely a riff on a classic in that it preserves the symbols of a traditional Marseille deck. It includes the postures and the directionality and background details that a Marseille deck would have, but it is contemporary, it's diverse, it's colorful, it has photographs in the background, which you know that I love, and having decks like this in my collection makes me happy to read Marseille. So this is definitely my favorite riff on a classic that I can associate with the old-fashioned per the prompt, even though the deck itself is anything but. The next prompt in the list is the Gin and Tonic, a no-frills, straightforward, to-the-point deck. Gin and Tonic is not one that I order too often. It feels like a really safe choice to me. If you haven't been somewhere before, like it's a hard drink to mess up. I'm not that into tonic though, so it's not one that I would usually pick. The deck that I chose for the Gin and Tonic is really one that is quite, I think, specific to me in terms of this prompt, being no frills, straightforward, and to the point. And that is the Heart and Hands Tarot by Liz Blackbird. This is straight to the point for me, specifically because it is the indie deck that has been in my collection the longest. And so I've done a ton of readings with this. Mine is trimmed. So I know this deck very well. I think, maybe I could connect it to the Gin and Tonic in that the Gin and Tonic doesn't have very many ingredients in it, and this is black and white deck. It is one that is really straightforward and to the point for me in readings because it is such a familiar favorite. So perfect for the classic Gin and Tonic. The next prompt is a Spritz, a deck to brighten your day. And Spritz is Aperol. I'm not that into Aperol. I think it has Prosecco as well. Not my style, I will say. Not something that I've ever ordered, actually. Like, I've tasted it, but it's not something that I would pick. And for a deck to brighten my day, I chose the Luminous Void Tarot. And I think that this one is a good one for a spritz to brighten your day because it is colorful and it just makes me smile. I've mentioned before that this is one that I really didn't think that I was interested in until I saw it in person in a store and they had an open copy that you could look at, and then it just totally captivated me. The faces are a little bit weird. I mean, it's hard to paint a face with watercolors, I think. And there's something funny about it. And it's very cheerful at the same time. It's very spring-like to me. And I think a spritz is a springtime drink. You know, it's definitely a refreshing, fruity treat. Refreshing, fruity treat, much like this delicious hibiscus sour, which I'm aspiring not to forget is there and have go warm while I'm filming this tag. Next up is Dirty Martini, a strong and salty deck. I am not a Dirty Martini person because I'm not an olive person. Gin and vermouth, sure, but olive brine is not my preferred beverage, so that's okay. For the Dirty Martini, a strong and salty deck, I had to choose the Tarot of the Silicon Dawn by Egypt Ernash. This deck is salty. And if you have this deck, you know. It is a strong and salty deck. This deck, you know, I'm not one to personify decks too much, but there's definitely a particular kind of attitude that this one has. And part of it is the guidebook. It is a sexy deck. It is a queer deck in the sense of being queer politically. It is one with a sense of humor and a really strong voice. And it is one that I really want to come back and print because I do think that it's one of the best guidebooks. So there is definitely something very strong and salty about Tarot of the Silicon Dawn, which makes it go well with the Dirty Martini. Next up is a Pina Colada, a deck for a summer holiday. Pina Colada is one that I feel like I've only ever had on a summer holiday. It's not something that I would make at home, really. It's not one that I necessarily gravitate to, but on a summer holiday, I get it. And so for Pina Colada, I chose the Gay Marseille by Charlie Claire Burgess. This has a beachy color palette, and so I think it goes well in that sense. I'm trying not to make a mess. And there is definitely a summery vibe to this deck in terms of its colors. There's a beach party going on in the moon card in this deck, which I think is an interesting choice. If you had to think about a beach party, the moon is probably not the first card that you would think of, but I enjoy that. This is totally something that I would take on summer holiday. I would read with this deck on the beach. So there's also, I think, with the kind of off-white background, maybe that has reminded me of the coconut that is in a Pina Colada, and so that's why I've chosen it for that particular prompt. Next up is essentially the opposite, a winter deck, and that is to go with Hot Toddy. Hot Toddy is totally something that I would drink. It's not something I make often, it's not something that I drink often, but I'm not opposed. So for that one, I chose a wintry deck. I feel like there's a couple of ways one could go with this prompt. A hot toddy is a warming drink on a cold day, on a cold time. And I just picked a deck that reminded me of winter, so it doesn't really remind me so much of a hot toddy as it does the environment in which I might drink one. And that is Le Tarot de Paysage Intérieur by Camille. This is a deck I found on Etsy. And it is very much a wintry deck with what feel like stark wintry scenes. So it's not one that I would use really most other times of year. It very much feels definitively like a winter deck to me. So it's one that I could imagine reading while having a hot toddy. I think that it makes sense. So that is my deck for a cold winter's night, Le Tarot de Paysage Intérieur. Next up is an Espresso Martini, an energy boosting deck. Not a cocktail that I would ever pick. I will say that I am just not into coffee flavored things. I drink black coffee every morning, but as soon as coffee is a flavor of something that isn't coffee, like ice cream or something like this, I'm not into it at all. So espresso martini to me is like, why would you do that to gin? Not my preference. But for an energy boosting deck, I chose Next World Tarot by Christy C. Road. This deck is galvanizing. This deck is a call to action. This deck is inspiring. This deck is not one that, lets you rest on your laurels, so to speak. And so in that sense, it's energizing. I also think that it's energizing in its bright color palette. And I have this bright pouch from Kelly Bear to keep it in. So it definitely jumps off of my shelf as an energetic, bright presence. And so I can really easily consider this one an energy boosting deck. Is it one that I would necessarily say screams espresso? Maybe not, but an energy booster, definitely. The next prompt is a Manhattan, a deck to take your time with, to sip and savor. And I will say, of all of the drinks on this list, a Manhattan is probably the one that I'm most likely to have. Definitely the one that I'm most likely to make for myself at home. Not a lot of ingredients, so it's an easy one to put together. In my house, the Manhattan is more likely to be a Rob Roy, which is the same thing, just with scotch instead of whiskey. But as a winter drink, a Rob Roy or a Manhattan is definitely, I would say, what I would choose if I was choosing a cocktail. So that would be my favorite on the list. A deck to take your time with. I chose one that reminds me a bit of the Manhattan in terms of color palette, and also is one to sip and savor, and that is the philosophy cards. I really like this deck. It is a Pippish deck, and it is one to take your time with because the major arcana are all philosophical concepts, particularly inspired by existential philosophy. So you have the Dionysian for card 3. 4 is the Apollonian. We have Eternal Return and the Metamorphosis and so on. And I feel like philosophy is something to take your time with and to sit and think about and mull over, perhaps with a Manhattan. So, philosophy cards are my Manhattan, a deck to sip and savor. Next up is the Mojito. Mojito is a palate cleansing deck for when you need a reset. And I'm making a huge mess of decks on my sofa. I'm trying. Okay. A mojito is a palate cleansing deck when you need a reset. I would never drink a mojito. No, thank you. Nope. I don't want minty rum. I did take the mojito as a color palette inspiration, though, to choose a palette cleansing deck, and I chose the Dreaming Way Tarot, which definitely has some mint in it. And this is a good palette cleansing deck, I think, because it is a very easy one to read. It is very straightforwardly Smith-Waite. It is one that doesn't have, I don't want to say, it reads very neutrally to me. It doesn't read as overly affirming and happy, and it also doesn't give readings that are particularly jarring. It just feels like a good, a good neutral read, and it's friendly, for lack of better language. When I've read in kind of public events, a lot of people tend to gravitate towards this. So I think as a palette cleanser, it's a really nice one. If you've maybe been reading with a deck that has a really strong particular kind of theme or sensibility to it, I could see this being a good palette cleanser. Plus, all of the green reminded me of a mojito. So that's my mojito deck. Next up is a Bloody Mary, a problem-solving deck. And a Bloody Mary is a thing that people drink when they're hungover, which I like things that are spicy, but I don't drink vodka and I don't like tomato juice. So a Bloody Mary is a no for me. I would never choose that, but there's so many different drinks, to each their own, right? For a problem-solving deck, though, I chose the Many Queens by Letty Jane Rennekamp. This visually has nothing to do with a Bloody Mary, but it's a problem-solving deck to me. It's one that I pick off the shelf when I'm feeling shitty about myself. It's one that I experience as really supportive in terms of doing work around kind of like body image type work. It's one that is another very clear reader. And I've definitely done some kind of decision-making type spreads with this deck. It is a really special one to me. So as a problem solver, it makes complete sense. I will say I picked this one mostly just based on the theme of problem-solving deck and not particularly Bloody Mary influenced. I don't know. Bloody Mary's not my thing. We'll leave it at that. A French 75 is the next prompt. French 75, a special occasions deck. I have never had a French 75. I know that it has champagne in it, but I've never had one. And when I read special occasions deck, my initial thought was, oh, I don't have anything like that, because I somehow rethought special occasions in my head to be like seasonal. Like this would be where someone would share like the Halloween tarot or something, because it's very date specific. And I don't have anything like that. What I do have that I can call a special occasions deck is the Taroki Hokusai. And this is a majors only deck done by, of course, Il Meneghello. And it has, the Il Meneghello backs. And this is a special occasions deck because it is only coming out for particular kinds of readings. I have used this deck to display my card of the year, or to, even select my card of the year, or to choose one card to then construct a bigger tarot reading around. I use majors only decks. I have a handful of them. They're not my go-to for a reading all the time, though. I have to kind of have a specific purpose to choose them. And this one is just very luxurious. You know, the Il Meneghello thick cardstock just feels really special. And the box with the seal on it feels really special. And so Hokusai definitely feels like a special occasions deck. So that's why I have put it with French 75. I probably wouldn't like French 75. I don't actually like champagne at all. So probably not the drink for me, but I really like that deck. The next drink on the list is Aviation. And the prompt for that is a wildcard deck for when you're feeling adventurous. I have never had Aviation either. I'm not even sure what is in it, but a deck for when I'm feeling adventurous. I chose Tarot for the Great Outdoors, and I know that my friend Liz over at West Star Tarot made the exact same choice. So that's kind of fun. This just, of course, feels like an adventurous deck, given that it is outdoors themed. And it has major arcana that are associated with the different national parks in the United States. The vast majority of which I have never visited, but I appreciate the scenic artwork very much. This is a really good deck. I think it would be one that I would consider gifting somebody in my life as a beginner deck, even though it's a slight bit unconventional in some of the artistic choices, because the Little White Book is pretty good. And the colors are so bright and cheerful. So definitely a deck for when I'm feeling adventurous would be Tarot for the Great Outdoors. And this is a deck that I would bring somewhere like camping. So it's quite literal in that sense, in terms of an adventurous deck. Now, the last prompt that was provided by Imogen in the initial video is the usual. Your drink of choice and your most used deck. Now, I already said that my drink of choice, you know, when I'm having something that has alcohol in it, tends to be beer or wine, red wine specifically, but I'm not going to be the person who, you know, makes the most boring pick on a cocktail themed tag and say beer, because that just, you know, that doesn't feel very fun or in the spirit of the tag. So I've already mentioned as well that my usual in terms of a winter cocktail would be the Arboreal or the Manhattan. My summer cocktail usual, though, would be a Mezcal Paloma. And a Mezcal Paloma is mezcal with grapefruit soda, like Jarrito's grapefruit soda, preferably. And so summery, and so refreshing, and so delicious. And it would have lime juice in it as well. So that's my summer drink. And my most used deck, to precisely no one's surprise, is Naturescapes Tarot. This in no way feels like a Mezcal Paloma to me. The Mezcal Paloma feels quite a bit more summery specifically, and you know, it's citrusy and bright with a little bit of smokiness from the mezcal, which is hard for me to connect to the Naturescapes Tarot, but the prompt did say what's your usual and your usual, so I'm answering honestly. Mezcal Paloma and Naturescapes. Now, there are a few other folks who have added on prompts, and I'm sure there's probably more that I'm going to mention, but there are a few extra prompts that caught my attention that I thought I would include in my own as well. So Kelly Bear added in whiskey sour, and I love a whiskey sour. I do love a whiskey sour. Whiskey in general is something that I like. So whiskey sour, Kelly themed as a deck that left a bitter taste in your mouth. And that could go a lot of different directions, I think. And I'm interpreting left a bitter taste in your mouth in a kind of negative way, even though whiskey sour is delicious. So that's not any insult to the drink itself. A deck that left a bitter taste in my mouth is the Literary Tarot. And The specific reason for that, I will say, it's not because the artwork is not beautiful, because it is. The cardstock is a bit of a problem. But the reason that this deck specifically left a bitter taste in my mouth is because during the campaign for this on Kickstarter, there was conversation, I think, from backers about how they would like to see more diversity, you know, particularly thinking about more LGBTQ rep in the artwork. And it's a deck that's inspired by classical literature. And what left a bitter taste in my mouth about the outcome of that feedback was that the creator's response to that was to make a booster pack of cards with more LGBTQ rep, and then to make it something that you had to buy extra on top of the price of the deck itself. And that left a bitter taste in my mouth, let me say. Not good. Not a good way to approach that feedback. That's all I'm going to say about that, because I will get ranty. That left a bitter taste in my mouth. I'm not sure if I'll keep the deck or if I won't keep the deck. It is beautiful. I don't use it. I'm bitter about having to pay extra for those extra cards. Bohemian Rose Tarot also added a bonus, which I thought was fun, and that's a shot of Malört, a deck no one wants or is tricked into buying. I have never had a shot of Malört. I don't even know what that is. I don't think I've ever had this, but apparently it's not very good if nobody wants it or is tricked into buying it. I'm not going to name a particular deck here in terms of something that I would feel tricked into buying or that nobody wants. But I don't want to buy anything with AI in it. I'm sure folks know this about me, or could guess it about me if they didn't already know. And I have seen some instances of decks that use a lot of AI and that haven't fully been transparent about that, including in one instance a deck that I almost backed, or I might have backed and then kind of unbacked later on Kickstarter, that it turns out is very heavily AI, and it didn't look like it on the campaign page, and it really wasn't articulated openly the way that Kickstarter rules require it to be. And so that, to me, is the shot of Malört. And, you know, it's not really a deck that nobody wants, because obviously some people will be into it, but it's definitely not one that I want to be tricked into buying, and I don't like a lack of transparency around that. Roaen here made a extra prompt as well for this, and Roaen's was the Cosmopolitan, and I wrote down what Roaen described the Cosmopolitan as: what you order if you grew up on vodka cran but you want to look like you know about drinks. So I'm interpreting the Cosmopolitan as something that is really quite approachable but looks or feels fancy, because that makes sense to me as a Cosmopolitan prompt. And also not a thing that I'm going to order ever. But I chose the Fyodor Pavlov Tarot to be the Cosmopolitan deck, because Fyodor Pavlov is a Smith-Waite deck. If you read Smith-Waite, you can read this, but it is fancy. And it looks fancy on a table with the metallic gold. And this is the mass market version from US Games. It has the metallic in the stars on the back. It has metallic gold edging. You know, in terms of something, you know, fancy and classy and beautiful, and a beautiful package with a hardcover book, this feels Cosmopolitan to me. Like really, really, really beautiful. Approachable in terms of being, you know, very much a readable deck if you have a basis in the Smith-Waite system, but fancy and special, like a Cosmopolitan. The extra prompt that I am going to add as a cocktail is one called the Sidecar. And the Sidecar is what you like to pair with tarot. Sidecar pairs with a vehicle. A Sidecar cocktail is cognac, and there wasn't, at least to my knowledge, any cognac on the list yet, so that's where my brain went. A tool or a, you know, something that you like to pair with tarot. That could be an oracle deck, that could be a spread cloth, that could be a journal, that could be a particular location in your house. Anything you want to be the sidecar to your tarot experience. And so I just chose the oracle deck that I've been using the most lately and really, really enjoying, and that is Dirt Gems. I love this deck. I have never cried so much or like so many times teared up with a deck as I have with this one. I did not expect to have that reaction to this, but the guidebook, something about it is very, very special. And it's colorful, so I can connect that to the Sidecar's orange and lemon, well, triple second lemon as well. So definitely a fast favorite oracle deck that I can associate with the Sidecar. So that is Tarot Bartender. Thank you so much to Imogen over at Sapling Tarot for creating the tag and for tagging me. And thank you to folks who've been making VRs and giving even more prompts to have fun with pairing decks with cocktails. And thank you so much for watching. Cheers. See you in the next one.